Y'all, I want to start this morning with a question that I think is the most important question in American wildfire coverage right now, and I want you to sit with it for a moment before I answer it. When was the last time you heard someone mention the Roe Creek Complex fire? When was the last time you saw it trending on social media, leading a national newscast, or appearing in the headlines of any major outlet you follow? If you're like most people watching this video, even most people who follow weather and natural disasters closely, the honest answer is probably never, or at best once in passing. And that silence around the Roe Creek Complex is the story I want to tell you this morning. Because while the Spokane fires were burning through residential neighborhoods on Washington's north side, and the cameras were rolling, and the evacuation numbers were climbing, and the satellite imagery of burned cul-de-sacs was going viral, the Roe Creek Complex in central and eastern Oregon was burning at a scale that makes the Spokane story, as devastating as it genuinely is, look small by comparison. The Roe Creek Complex has burned 364,413 acres. The Spokane Complex has burned approximately 10,000 acres. The Roe Creek Complex is 36 times larger than the fire that made national headlines, dominated cable news coverage, and became the defining image of the 2026 wildfire crisis in the public consciousness. 36 times larger. Quietly burning in the high desert of central Oregon, while the cameras were pointed at Spokane. And I think the people of Oregon, the people who care about wildfire science, and every community in a fire-prone region of this country deserve to understand how that happens and what it means. Let me be very clear about something before I go any further. I am not criticizing the coverage of the Spokane fires, and I'm not minimizing what happened in Spokane. What the Spokane complex did to the Indian Trail neighborhood, to the families who returned to find treasured memories turned to ashes, to the 65,000 people who evacuated, all of that is real. It is devastating, and it deserves every word of coverage it received. The Spokane fires were a human disaster of the first order. People lost their homes. A city lost a piece of its neighborhood fabric. Those are real losses that belong in the national conversation. What I am saying is that the American news media's approach to wildfire coverage, like its approach to most disaster coverage, is structured around a set of factors that have very little to do with the ecological scale or the long-term significance of the event, and everything to do with visual drama, proximity to urban populations, and the speed with which images of destruction can reach an audience. A fire that burns 364,000 acres in the remote high desert of central Oregon, through sagebrush and juniper and ponderosa pine, through landscapes where the human population density is measured in people per square mile rather than per block, does not produce the imagery that drives national coverage. There are no before and after satellite photos of destroyed cul-de-sacs. There are no social media videos of walls of flame racing through residential streets. There are no evacuating families loading cars in front of burning houses. The Roe Creek Complex is burning through terrain that most Americans have never set foot in and cannot picture, producing ecological devastation at a scale that staggers the imagination but generates no imagery that moves through the news cycle. And the consequence of that coverage gap is that the vast majority of Americans do not understand what the 2026 wildfire season is actually doing to the American West. They understand that Spokane had a terrible weekend. They do not understand that Oregon has burned nearly 2 million acres in a single season, breaking its all-time wildfire record and surpassing the previous record set in 2024. They do not understand that Oregon and Washington together have now burned through more than 3 million combined acres in 2026, a number that was confirmed by Fox 12 Oregon on Sunday, August 9th, who also reported that 150,000 additional acres burned on August 9th alone, which was double the rate from the Friday before. They do not understand that 52 active large fires are burning across Oregon and Washington simultaneously, that the national preparedness level has been at 5 for weeks, that firefighters from Australia and New Zealand are on the ground in the Pacific Northwest, because the American firefighting resource system has been fully committed for a sustained period and needs international reinforcement. None of that is the story that the national media is telling. The story the national media is telling is the Spokane story. And the Spokane story is true and important, but it is a single chapter in a book that is vastly larger than the chapter everyone is reading. The Roe Creek Complex in particular deserves direct attention because of what its scale represents in the context of Oregon's fire history. At 364,000 acres as of the Wildfire Explorer's August 10th update, with 1,800 people still under evacuation orders and crews working to hold a 76% containment line through the high wind conditions that the weekend brought, the Roe Creek Complex is burning through the heart of Central Oregon's high desert landscape. Central Oregon is not wilderness in the sense of being uninhabited or economically irrelevant. It is cattle grazing country. It is rangeland that supports agricultural operations that have existed for generations. It is habitat for pronghorn antelope, for sage grouse, for the full suite of sagebrush steppe species that depend on large, intact high desert landscapes for their survival. When 364,000 acres of that landscape burns in a single season, the ecological consequences are not visible in satellite imagery of burned cul-de-sacs. They are expressed over years and decades in soil erosion, in cheatgrass invasion of burned sagebrush areas, in the loss of wildlife habitat, in the disruption of the hydrological cycles that the high desert depends on. These consequences are real. They are documented. And they do not make headlines. The data from August 9th is the most alarming single-day number of the entire 2026 fire season, and it underlines exactly why the broader Oregon and Washington fire story deserves sustained national attention. 150,000 acres burned on August 9th alone. In a single day, double the rate from August 7th, Oregon and Washington surpassed 3 million combined acres burned on that same day. And the KPTV Fox 12 meteorologist who reported those numbers made sure to add what I think is the most chilling piece of context in this entire story. We still have several weeks remaining in wildfire season, the worst season on record for Oregon, the worst for Washington in more than 30 years. 3 million acres between the two states, and weeks left to go. Y'all, the gap between what the national media is covering and what is actually happening in the American West right now is not a small gap. It is a chasm. And the communities in the path of these fires, the ranchers watching their grazing land burn, the rural towns watching their surrounding landscape turn to ash, the firefighters working in the remote high desert far from any camera, deserve to have that gap acknowledged and closed. This channel exists in part to close it. So let me give you the full picture. The Big Grass Fire in Malheur County, Oregon, which I covered in detail when it became the largest active fire in the country at 304,000 acres, is itself approximately 30 times larger than the Spokane complex. It is burning in remote high desert terrain. The Coleman Creek Fire in Harney County at 212,000 acres is 21 times larger than the Spokane complex. The Second Flat Fire, which has burned 105,000 acres and is 85% contained according to Wildfire Explorer's August 10th update, is 10 times larger than the Spokane complex. The Bench Fire near Warm Springs at 67,000 acres is 6 times larger. Every one of these fires dwarfs the Spokane complex in acreage. None of them received the same level of national media attention that the Spokane complex received. And the reason is entirely about where the fires are burning, not how much they are burning. That is the coverage gap. That is what I want every person watching this video to carry forward from this morning, not just the knowledge that the Roe Creek complex exists and is massive, but the understanding that the story the national media tells about any disaster is shaped by factors that have nothing to do with ecological or human significance. Urban fires generate urban imagery, rural fires generate acreage numbers, and the American public, by and large, processes acreage numbers as abstractions while processing imagery of burning houses as emergencies. The challenge for every weather and science communicator who cares about getting this story right is to translate those acreage numbers into something that feels as real as the imagery. Because 364,000 acres of burning Oregon high desert is as real and as significant as 640 burned Spokane homes. It is different in character. It is not different in scale or in consequence. The 30,000 plus firefighters who are battling 90 uncontained fires across the country right now, including the crews working the Roe Creek complex in 76% containment territory, the crews doing structure protection for the Spokane complex at 0% containment, the international crews from Australia and New Zealand who have crossed the Pacific to help, all of them are fighting fires that matter. All of them are protecting landscapes and communities and ecosystems that matter. The ones in front of cameras deserve the coverage they are getting. The ones in the remote high desert deserve coverage too. And I am going to keep giving it to them. Share this video with everyone you know who follows the wildfire story in the American West. Tell them about the Roe Creek complex. Tell them about the 3 million acres. Tell them about the 150,000 acres in a single day. Tell them that the worst is not over. And as always, stay safe out there. I love y'all.